Sweetheart, I never imagined I'd be sitting here in my old rocking chair, telling you this story after all these years. My hands still tremble when I think about it. My voice still shakes. And even now, when I close my eyes, I can see that picture as clearly as the day I first held it in my hands, that one picture the photographer whispered I should never look at. But I did. And it changed everything I believed about my wedding, my husband, and the life I thought I understood. I was a young bride back then, 22, foolish, glowing, hopelessly in love. My wedding was warm and simple, held under a wooden archway covered in lilies. My dress wasn't expensive, but it felt like magic on my skin. Everyone kept saying my smile could light up the whole field. And maybe it could. I was so full of hope, so full of trust. The photographer, Mr. Collins, was a gentle older man with shaky hands but sharp eyes. He'd been doing weddings for decades, and people loved him because of how carefully he captured moments. I remember him patting my shoulder softly as he left that day, telling me I'd been one of the brightest brides he'd ever photographed. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? But when weeks turned into months and the photo album never came, my heart started to feel uneasy. My husband, well, I'll tell you more about him later, but he kept brushing it off, saying the man was old, slow, probably forgetful. But something inside me felt wrong. Like a soft whisper I couldn't hear clearly yet. One rainy morning, almost 5 months after the wedding, I heard a knock on my door. When I opened it, there stood Mr. Collins, drenched and trembling, clutching a thick envelope to his chest like it carried something heavy, something he didn't want to hold anymore. "My dear," he said, voice cracked. "I'm sorry it took so long. I should have delivered these sooner, but there's one picture you need to be careful with." I didn't understand. I invited him inside, made him warm tea, sat him near the fireplace. His eyes kept darting toward the envelope, like he was afraid it might open by itself. And every time he looked away, his lips trembled like he was fighting words he didn't want to say. Finally, I asked him what was wrong. He cleared his throat, placed a shaking hand on mine and whispered, "There's a photo inside your album that should never have been taken." I tried to remove it, but someone kept placing it back in the envelope. Someone who wasn't supposed to be there. I frowned, confused. Someone who? He swallowed hard. "I don't know. But dear, when you look at that picture, don't look directly at the left corner. Promise me." And then he stood up abruptly, as if terrified his own words might choke him, and left without letting me ask anything more. The door shut behind him, and his footsteps faded into the rain. I stared at the envelope for minutes, maybe hours, I can't remember. My heart thudded so hard I could hear the blood in my ears. And maybe you think I should have listened to him, right? Maybe I should have tucked that envelope away and lived a peaceful life. But have you ever felt curiosity burning so deep inside your bones that it becomes impossible to ignore? Like a quiet voice saying, "Look, just look once." Tell me honestly, if you were in my place, would you have opened that envelope or walked away? Sometimes I wonder what kind of life I'd have if I'd chosen differently. But the truth is, I opened it. My hands were shaking, but I opened it. Inside was a thick album with a golden border. Beautiful. Simple. The kind of thing a bride waits for her whole life. I felt that warm flutter in my chest as I flipped through the first few pages. Me and my bridesmaids laughing, the flowers, the ceremony, the kiss. All innocent, all sweet. Then halfway through I found it. A page I didn't recognize. A picture I didn't remember being taken. The air around me changed. It felt colder. Still. Heavy. It was a photo of me standing under the lily archway, looking directly into the camera, except I wasn't smiling. I wasn't posing. I looked terrified. My eyes were wide, almost pleading, like I was silently begging someone for help. Like I'd seen something behind the photographer. My breath hitched painfully as I just stared at myself in that picture, because I didn't remember making that face. I didn't remember feeling fear that day. I remembered joy, laughter, my mother crying, my husband squeezing my hand. Not fear. Never fear. And then my eyes slid toward the left corner of the picture. I didn't want to look. My stomach twisted. My skin prickled. But sometimes the heart moves before the mind can stop it. I looked. And the moment I saw who was standing there, the album slipped out of my hands and fell to the floor. My knees weakened. My breath left my lungs. Because in that shadowed corner, barely visible but horribly clear once you saw it, was a person, standing behind me, watching me. A face I knew but shouldn't have seen there. A face I thought I'd never see again after the night of my engagement. I felt tears rise to my eyes. My heart squeezed so tight it hurt. And for the first time since my wedding day, every memory I thought was safe began falling apart like fragile glass. And sweetheart, if you stay with me through this story, I'll tell you exactly who that person was, and why that one picture almost destroyed my life. But before I go on, if you want me to continue this story, you better sit tight, take a deep breath, and promise you'll stay with me till the end. Because the truth I'm about to reveal in the next chapter, you won't see it coming. I must have sat on that living room floor for 10, maybe 15 minutes, just staring at that picture like it was some kind of ghost that had climbed out of my past. My breathing was shaky, my heartbeat wild. And all I kept whispering was, no, this can't be real. Because the person standing in that left corner, the person the photographer told me not to look at, was someone I had buried in my memories long ago. Someone I had tried to forget. Someone I had prayed was gone from my life forever. It was my ex-fiancé, the man who disappeared months before my wedding. The man who broke me in ways I still don't have words for. The man whose temper I ignored for too long. The man who swore with a darkness in his voice, that if I ever left him, he'd never let me go. Not truly. Not completely. I thought I escaped him when he vanished. When he stopped calling. When the police told me they couldn't track a grown man who chose to leave. I thought he moved on, or maybe life carried him in another direction. I tried to believe that. But to see him there in my wedding photo, standing in the shadows behind me, I felt my blood turn to ice. My fingers trembled as I picked up the album again. I held the picture close, so close my breath fogged the page. And the more I looked, the worse it got. His face wasn't smiling. It wasn't angry. It was blank. Empty. Watching me with a stare that didn't belong on a wedding day. I slammed the album shut. My chest ached. I didn't know what scared me more, his presence in that picture, or the fact that I didn't remember him being there. Shouldn't I have felt something? Seen something? Heard something? Anything? Did he whisper something in my ear? Did he stand behind me while I posed? Did he hide among the guests? My mind kept running in circles like a frightened child trapped in a dark room. By the time my husband came home, the album was still on the table. He walked in humming, tossing his keys on the counter, shaking off the cold. I remember watching him from across the room and wondering whether I should tell him, or whether telling him might open a door I wasn't ready to walk through. But marriage, darling, a marriage is built on truth, and fear, and quiet secrets we try to bury. So I handed him the photo. He frowned, flipped the album open, looked at the picture, blinked once, then leaned closer. "What's wrong with it?" he asked. My heart dropped. "You don't see him?" "See who?" I grabbed the album back, tapped the left corner with a shaking finger. "There. Look there. Behind me." He squinted again. "It's just shadows, sweetheart. There's no one there." For a moment I felt the room spinning. Was I losing my mind? Was grief or fear or memory playing tricks on me? No, because I saw him. I knew that face. I knew that shape, that posture, that familiar emptiness in his eyes. But my husband saw nothing. And that terrified me even more. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the old clock ticking beside me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that corner of the photo, that faint outline, his face watching me, silent, still. And sweetheart, let me ask you something, because I really want to know. If you were lying in your bed, knowing someone from your past might have been hiding in the shadows of your happiest day, would you tell anyone? Or would you keep it inside and pretend everything was normal? I wonder sometimes what choice you would have made. The next morning after my husband left for work, I called Mr. Collins. He answered on the first ring, almost as if he'd been waiting for me. "You looked at it, didn't you?" His voice was thin, breathless. I saw him," I whispered. "How did you know?" He sighed heavily. "Because I saw him too." My grip tightened on the phone. "What happened that day? Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because," he said, "I didn't want to frighten you. And because I wasn't sure if my eyes were telling the truth. I thought maybe age was catching up with me. But when I developed that picture, he appeared in it, clear as day. A man standing behind you. A face I didn't recognize. And I swear to you, child, I didn't take that shot while he was there. In that moment, no one stood behind you. A chill ran through me so sharp I almost dropped the phone. So how did he end up in the photo? Silence. Long painful silence. I've seen things through my lens, he finally murmured. Things people don't see with their own eyes. Faces. Shadows. People who shouldn't be there. But this man felt different. He lowered his voice to almost a whisper. He wasn't looking at you. He was looking at me. As if he knew I'd capture him. My heart thudded violently. What does that mean? It means, he said, you need to be careful. Something about him felt wrong. Not supernatural, not ghostly, just wrong. I felt danger when I saw him. My throat tightened. But why my photo? Why my wedding? I don't know, he whispered. But if he was there that day, he'll come back. The room felt cold, as if the walls themselves were listening. After the call, I sat on the couch gripping the album like it might break open and swallow me whole. Then slowly I opened it again. This time when I looked at the picture, the corner felt darker. Like his shadow had grown. Like he had stepped 1 inch closer to me. My breath caught. I blinked hard. No, maybe it was just my imagination. Maybe fear was playing tricks on me. But deep down I knew it wasn't imagination. I felt him. Like something behind that paper was alive. I slammed it shut again. My hands were sweating, my chest rising and falling like I'd run for miles. I wanted to scream. I wanted to burn the whole album. But I couldn't look away from the truth. Someone from my past had found his way back into my life. And he didn't appear in that photo by accident. Sweetheart, stay close. Because in the next part of my story, I'm going to tell you what he did next. And why that picture was only the beginning. I wish I could tell you I was strong after seeing that picture. I wish I could say I stood up, took a deep breath and faced the truth head on. But sweetheart, the truth is I was scared. Scared in a way I hadn't felt since the last night I saw him, my ex-fiancé. Standing in the doorway of my tiny apartment, rage simmering under his skin, telling me I'd regret leaving him. I remember his voice like it's carved into the walls of my memory. Calm. Too calm. Like a storm that wanted to pretend it wasn't coming. And now, all these years later, he was standing in the corner of my wedding photograph, without ever being there in person. I spent that whole day pacing the house. My husband kept calling to say he'd be home late. Some emergency meeting, he said, but I could barely focus on his words. All I could think about was that picture. That shadow. That blank stare. That man I had escaped but apparently not truly left behind. Around sunset, I finally gathered the courage to look at the album again. I don't know why. Maybe it was foolish curiosity. Maybe I needed answers. Or maybe fear has a strange way of forcing us closer to the things we want to run from. I opened the album slowly, page by page, my heart pounding louder than the ticking clock behind me. And then when I reached the page with the photo, I froze. Sweetheart, the picture had changed. Not much. Not enough for a normal eye to notice. But enough for mine. His shadow had moved just slightly. It was no longer tucked into the far corner. It was closer. Just half an inch closer. His face was still blurred by distance, but the outline of his shoulders, broad, tense, was clearer than before. I slammed the album shut so fast the pages bent. My breath shook. My hands felt cold. And for the first time in years, I felt like that helpless young woman again. The one who stayed awake at night listening for footsteps outside her door. I didn't know what to do. Who to call? My husband wouldn't believe me. The police wouldn't believe me. And Mr. Collins, well, he'd already seen too much. That night sleep didn't come easy. I kept waking up, checking the corners of the room, listening for sounds that weren't there. And every time I closed my eyes, I saw that shifting shadow. Growing. Watching. Waiting. The next morning I decided something. I needed to confront the past. Not run from it. Fear only grows in the dark, and I'd kept my memories in the dark for far too long. So I drove to see Mr. Collins. His little photography studio sat on the edge of town, tucked between an antique shop and an abandoned bakery. I used to think it felt nostalgic and peaceful, but that day it felt lonely. Too lonely. When I stepped inside, the bell above the door rang softly. The room smelled like old paper and chemicals. Hundreds of photographs hung on the walls, Weddings, birthdays, families, but they felt different now. Like 100 pairs of eyes watching me silently. "Mr. Collins?" I called. No answer. I walked deeper into the studio, past the counter, past the shelves of old lenses. At the back of the room, I found him sitting at his desk, staring at a photo so intensely he didn't even hear me come in. "Mr. Collins?" He jolted, startled, and pressed a trembling hand to his chest. "Oh, my dear. You scared me." He looked tired. Older. Like he'd aged 10 years overnight. "I need to talk to you," I whispered. "I know," he said softly, sliding the photograph face down. "You saw it change." I froze. "How did you?" He sighed. "Because it changed for me too." A cold tremor rippled through me. "Why is it happening?" "I don't know," he whispered, rubbing his temples. "But whatever that presence is, it's tied to you. Not the camera. Not the film. You." My throat tightened. "Why me? Why now?" He hesitated. His eyes softened. "My dear. Sometimes people from our past don't let go easily. Sometimes the things they leave behind find their own ways back." I felt tears in my eyes. Silent. Hot. Painful. "But he wasn't there," I whispered. "I didn't see him. My husband didn't see him. The guests didn't see him. So how could he be in that picture?" Mr. Collins leaned back slowly and closed his eyes. "Let me tell you something I've learned after 50 years behind a camera. Sometimes a lens doesn't just capture what is. Sometimes it captures what hides." I swallowed hard, fear crawling across my skin. "What do I do?" He looked at me with such sadness it made my heart break. "You face the truth. Whatever it is." I felt dizzy, shaken. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But I just stood there, holding myself like I was afraid I'd fall apart. "Sweetheart, let me ask you something. And be honest with yourself when you answer. If you saw a picture of your happiest moment, and someone you feared, someone who hurt you, appeared in that picture without ever being there, would you look deeper for answers? Or would you burn the photo and pretend it never existed?" I still wonder which choice would have saved me. Before I could say anything, Mr. Collins pushed the face-down photograph toward me. "This isn't your wedding photo," he said. "It's something else I captured recently. Something I think you need to see." With trembling fingers I turned it over. And I gasped. Because the picture wasn't of me. It wasn't of my wedding. It was of Mr. Collins' own studio. Empty. Quiet. Dimly lit. But in the corner, just like in my wedding photo, stood the same shadowed figure. My ex-fiancé. Watching. Closer this time. Much closer. I stepped back. My whole body trembled violently. "He's not gone," Mr. Collins whispered. "He's coming back." And sweetheart, the worst part wasn't the picture. It was the look in Mr. Collins' eyes. A look that told me this wasn't going to stop. Not until the truth came out. When I left Mr. Collins' studio that day, I felt like every shadow on the street was watching me. Every passing stranger made my heart jump. The cold air brushed against my neck, and I kept turning around as if someone was following me. Maybe nobody was there. Or maybe I'd simply stopped trusting what my eyes could see. I sat in my car for a long while, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The photograph of my ex-fiancé in that studio corner burned in my mind. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't a coincidence. Somehow he kept appearing closer each time. I drove home with shaky hands, every red light feeling like danger, every intersection feeling like a warning. When I reached my house, I hurried inside and locked every door, every window, every latch. And then I went straight to the living room and pulled out the album. I almost didn't want to open it. But fear mixed with a terrible kind of curiosity. I had to know. I sat on the carpet, took a deep breath, and slowly turned the pages. There it was. The same photo. The same archway. The same me standing in my wedding dress. But now the shadow was no longer in the corner. He was directly behind me. Closer than breath. Close enough that if it had been real, I would have felt his presence on my skin. I choked on my own breath and slammed the album shut, my hands shaking so badly the edges of the pages bent. I pressed my back against the couch and stared at the album like it was a living thing. Because, sweetheart, I swear to you, the moment I shut it, the cover moved. Just slightly. as if something inside had shifted, as if something alive was trying to push its way out. I staggered back, heart pounding so loudly it echoed in my ears. Tears filled my eyes, and all I whispered was, "Why are you doing this? Why now?" And then suddenly I heard the front door open. My husband walked in, tired, stressed, loosening his tie. But when he saw my face, my shaking hands, my red eyes, he rushed toward me. "What happened? What's wrong?" I couldn't speak for a moment. Words felt stuck in my throat, trapped by fear. Finally, I pointed at the album. "It moved," I whispered. "The picture, it changed again. He's right behind me now." My husband kneeled beside me and opened the album. He stared at the photo for a long moment. Then he sighed softly. "There's nothing there," he said. "Just you." My stomach twisted. No, he's there, he's right there. "There's no one in the background," he insisted. "It's just shadows and trees. You're scaring yourself." Anger and fear tangled together inside me. How could he not see it? How could he not feel what I felt? But before I could say anything, he closed the album and pulled me into his arms. "You're stressing yourself too much," he murmured. "It's just a picture, sweetheart. Just a picture. Just a picture." That's what everyone always says, until the truth shows itself. That night I didn't sleep in the bedroom. I felt safer in the living room, close to the lights, close to the doors. I kept the album across the room, far away from me, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. About him. About how he kept appearing in places he couldn't possibly be. And then around 2 in the morning a sound woke me. A soft thud, like something heavy falling to the floor. I sat up slowly, heart pounding, listening carefully. Then I heard it again. Thud. Coming from the direction of the album. I swallowed hard, breath shaking. I didn't want to go near it. I didn't want to see it. But some part of me knew that if I didn't check, I'd never sleep again. I stood up slowly and walked across the room, every step feeling heavier than the last. My fingers trembled as I reached for the album. The cover was slightly open, just a small crack, like someone had tried to push it open from the inside. My breath caught painfully. I reached out and closed it. But as soon as I touched it, something cold washed through me. A memory. No, something stronger than a memory. A flash. My ex-fiancé's voice, whispering my name. I stumbled back, clutching my chest. Tears spilled from my eyes, hot and fast. "Why are you here?" I whispered into the empty room. "What do you want from me?" And sweetheart, this part is hard for me to admit. Harder than anything else I've told you so far. Because fear can make a person think strange things. Fear can twist the mind, distort the truth, break the strongest hearts. So let me ask you, if you were alone in a quiet house and something from your past suddenly felt alive again, what would you do? Would you run? Would you scream? Would you try to explain it? Or would you shut your mouth and pretend it wasn't happening because the truth felt too heavy? I did what most people do. I stayed silent. The next morning, I took the album to the backyard. I thought about burning it, ending it, stopping whatever was creeping into my life. I held a match in my hand, trembling. But when I looked at the album, I felt something stop me. It wasn't fear. It was something else. Something colder. A certainty that destroying the album wouldn't destroy him. It might even make things worse. So instead, I hid it in the top of an old cabinet in the hallway closet. Place no one touched. Place I could forget about. At least that's what I thought. For a few days life felt normal. My husband went to work. I cleaned the house, cooked dinner, made tea, tried to breathe. But on the 4th day, the album was no longer in the closet. It was sitting on my bed, open, waiting. Sweetheart, that was the moment I knew this wasn't just a haunting from the past. This was a warning. And the truth behind that warning was about to change everything I believed about my marriage, my safety, and the man I thought I had escaped. I stood in the bedroom doorway for a long time, just staring at that album lying open on my bed like it belonged there, like it had chosen that spot. The curtains were still. The windows were locked. The house was silent. Nothing looked disturbed, except that one book I'd hidden away like a secret I prayed would never crawl back out. And yet there it was, open, waiting for me. I stepped closer slowly, my breath trembling with each step. I didn't want to look at the picture. I didn't want to see how much he had moved, how close he might be standing now. But the page was already open to the same photo, the same moment, the same haunting corner. I forced myself to look. Sweetheart, he wasn't in the background anymore. He was standing right beside me. In the picture, on my wedding day, my ex-fiancé was standing inches from my face like he'd leaned in to whisper something in my ear. His outline was clearer now, as if the camera had decided he belonged in the frame. His head was tilted toward me. His expression still empty, but his presence too close, too real. I gasped and dropped the album. It hit the floor with a heavy thud, and I backed up so fast I nearly tripped over the dresser. Tears blurred my eyes. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard it hurt. This wasn't normal. This wasn't photography. This wasn't memory playing games with me. This was him, coming closer each time, like he was trying to return to me through the only moment he knew he could steal. I ran out of the bedroom and slammed the door shut behind me. My hands shook so violently I had to grip the hallway wall just to steady myself. The air felt thick, like something unseen was standing behind me, watching me, breathing with me. I didn't dare turn around. When my husband came home that evening, I told him everything. Every detail, where I found the album, what the picture looked like, how he kept appearing closer. I expected confusion, concern, anger, but instead he laughed. Not loudly, not mockingly, just softly in a way that felt wrong. Too calm, too casual. Honey, he said, rubbing my shoulder, you're exhausted. You're stressed. You've been fixating on this picture for days. It's not real. None of this is real. My stomach twisted. It is real. I'm not imagining it. He kissed my forehead like I was a child having a nightmare. You need rest. That's all. His calmness unnerved me. His disbelief hurt. And the way he avoided looking at the album, that bothered me more than anything. I'm throwing it away, I whispered. No, he said quickly, too quickly. No, don't do that. Just leave it for now. Don't touch it again. I froze. Why did he say it like that? Why did he sound almost protective of it? I didn't argue. I didn't have the strength. But deep inside, something settled uncomfortably in my gut. Something cold, something heavy, something whispering that this wasn't just about the picture. That my husband knew something he wasn't telling me. That night when he went to bed, I stayed awake in the hallway, listening for any sound from the bedroom, any rustle, any breath, any whisper. Hours passed. The moon shifted in the window. My eyes grew heavy, but I stayed awake. Around 3 a.m. I heard it. The soft creak of the bedroom door opening. I held my breath. Footsteps. Slow. Careful. Then my husband's voice, low and gentle, speaking to someone, or something, inside the room. I crept closer, my heart beating so loudly it echoed in my ears. I leaned near the doorframe just enough to hear. You shouldn't be here, he whispered. Not yet. My body went cold. Who was he talking to? I pushed the door open just an inch. The room was dim, lit only by the lamp on the nightstand. And there, sitting on the bed, was my husband, staring at the open album. Why are you back? He whispered again. Why now? I stepped inside slowly. Who are you talking to? He jumped, startled, and slammed the album shut. His face drained of color. Nothing. I wasn't talking to anyone. You said, why are you back? I whispered. Who's back? He ran a hand across his face and shook his head. You misheard. You're tired. Please just sleep. But I knew I hadn't misheard. I knew exactly what I heard. And sweetheart, let me ask you something honestly. If you saw the person you trusted most whispering to something you feared most, would you still trust them? Or would your heart start warning you that the danger wasn't just in the photo, but in your home? After he fell asleep, I lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling, drowning in thoughts I didn't want to think. What if my husband wasn't confused? What if he wasn't blind to the figure in the photo? What if he recognized him? The next morning after he left for work, I made a decision. I didn't care how terrified I was. I didn't care if it destroyed me. I needed answers. I opened the bedroom door slowly, expecting to find the album on the floor where it had fallen. But it wasn't there. It was on my pillow, neatly placed, open to a new page, a page I'd never seen before. Not my wedding. Not the ceremony. Not the guests. It was a picture of me, standing in my kitchen, taken from behind. From last night, I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands turned cold. Tears rose instantly, because in that photo behind me, in the dark doorway, my ex-fiancé was standing, closer than ever. I dropped the album and backed away, my breath uncontrollable. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from screaming. This wasn't just the past haunting me. Someone had taken that photo last night. Someone had been in my house, watching me, standing behind me. And sweetheart, the next thing I discovered after that picture would shatter the last piece of safety I thought I had. My dear, when I finally walked back into my house after that night at the photographer's studio, I felt like the walls were breathing with me, trembling the same way my old body trembled. I sat on the couch, staring at the wedding album lying on my lap, and I kept wondering why my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Maybe it was because for the first time in my life, I had seen something that made me question whether the truth I lived with for decades was ever the truth at all. I remember leaning back, trying to calm my breathing, telling myself that I was overreacting. After all, it was just a picture, just a shadow, just a strange posture in the background. But the photographer's eyes. Oh, sweetheart, those eyes were filled with the kind of fear a man can't fake. He had seen something. Something he didn't dare name. Something he believed could break me. And maybe he was right. I opened the album again. And just like that, memories began to flow like a river I could no longer dam. My wedding day, the laughter, the smell of white roses, the warmth of the sun on my veil, all suddenly began to feel like borrowed memories from someone else's life. I stared deeply at that disturbing photo. My husband's face turned away. His shoulders lifted as if something behind him whispered in his ear, something only he could hear. And that vague silhouette behind us, a shape that looked too human to be a shadow, too dark to be a person, too still to be alive. Before I continue, let me ask you something, sweetheart. Just pause for a moment and think. Have you ever looked at a picture, maybe an old family photo, and felt like someone in it wasn't supposed to be there? Someone you never noticed before? Someone who looked out of place? Because that's the feeling that wrapped itself around my heart that night, squeezing and squeezing until I felt like I couldn't breathe. As I stared, the room around me seemed to fade. Memories shifted, twisted, blurred. I remembered my husband excusing himself several times during the reception, disappearing behind the garden, saying he needed fresh air. I remembered how he kept checking over his shoulder during our first dance, like something followed him, something I couldn't see. And I remembered waking up the next morning, newly married and deeply in love, only to find him sitting at the edge of the bed, pale, sweating, staring at the wall as if something had whispered his name in his sleep. I never questioned it. Not once. Because love makes you blind. And because sometimes, sweetheart, we want to believe the version of someone we build in our minds, not the version they show us in moments we choose to forget. I finally closed the album and placed it on the table, trying to steady my heart. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, leaned on the counter, and stared out the window into the dark night. And that's when I heard it. A soft, distant creak. Not from the kitchen. Not from the living room. But from the hallway where the wedding album lay open. My heart froze. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just listened. And there it was again. Another small creak, as if someone lightly stepped on a wooden floorboard. My house was old, sure. But this sound wasn't the usual settling of wood. This sound was deliberate. Measured. Like footsteps. I took a slow breath and told myself I was imagining it. But then the air around me shifted, turning colder, heavier. As if something unseen had walked into the room behind me. I turned around slowly, my fingers gripping the counter so hard they turned white. The living room was dark except for the faint glow of the lamp. And there, on the couch, the wedding album was no longer closed. The page had flipped back open. The same disturbing photo staring straight at me, as if someone or something had turned it. My knees almost buckled. I whispered my husband's name without meaning to, as if calling out to him would somehow protect me from whatever was unfolding in my quiet little house. I forced myself to walk forward, each step heavier than the last. I reached the couch, blinked hard and leaned in. And then my heart nearly stopped. Because the silhouette in the background of the photo, it looked slightly different now. More defined. Less like a blur. More like a shape. More like it was standing closer to us. I screamed and stumbled back, knocking over the lamp, the entire room falling into shadow. I pressed my back against the wall, breathing so fast my chest ached. I couldn't understand it. Pictures don't change. Shadows don't move. Memories don't rewrite themselves. Unless they were never memories at all. The house felt colder still. The air seemed to press around my shoulders like a pair of hands. My eyes darted around the room, expecting to see something, anything. Standing in the darkness, watching me the way that shadow watched me in the photograph. I don't know how long I stood there. Minutes? Hours? Time slips when fear becomes the only thing you can feel. Finally, I picked up the lamp, set it upright and turned it back on. The soft glow returned. The room warmed slightly. And the silhouette still looked sharper. Clearer. Closer. My fingers shook as I closed the album again, almost slamming it shut, and I held it tight against my chest. I knew what I had to do. I had to go back. I had to confront the only person besides me who had seen that photo change, the photographer. I had to know what he was hiding, what he was afraid to tell me, what truth he thought I wasn't strong enough to face. Because deep in my bones, in the oldest parts of my trembling heart, I felt something I didn't want to admit. Something I had buried for years. My husband didn't leave me because he stopped loving me. He left because something followed him. And now it had found its way back. Sweetheart, get ready. Because what happened when I returned to the photographer's studio was the moment everything finally broke open. Sweetheart, when I tell you I barely slept that night, I mean my eyes stayed open until the first weak line of morning light slipped through my curtains. I sat there holding that wedding album as if it were a living thing that might crawl out of my hands if I loosened my grip. And maybe that sounds dramatic, but when your past begins to move on its own, fear becomes the only language your body knows. As soon as the sun rose, I wrapped my shawl around my shoulders and stepped outside, the cold air biting at my cheeks. The photographer's studio wasn't far, just 4 blocks from my home, but each step I took felt like I was walking deeper into a truth I wasn't ready to learn. Still, I kept going. Sometimes fear pushes you forward more than courage ever could. When I reached the studio, the door wasn't fully closed. It was slightly ajar, swaying just a little with the breeze. My heart tightened. The photographer was a careful man. He always locked his door. He always turned the lights off. He wasn't the type to leave anything half done. My fingers trembled as I pushed the door open wider and called out his name. No answer. The studio was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't belong in a place where memories are usually captured, printed, held. Something about the air felt wrong, heavy, thick, almost metallic against my tongue. I stepped forward, each footstep echoing softly. And then I saw him. The photographer was sitting in his chair, slumped forward, his head resting on his chest, his breathing shallow but steady. He looked exhausted, drained, like someone who hadn't slept in days. His hands hung limply over his knees, and beside him on the small wooden table was a stack of photos, my photos. The same ones he refused to let me see until last night. My heart squeezed painfully. I walked toward him and gently placed my hand on his shoulder. His eyes fluttered open slowly, and when he saw me, fear immediately filled them. Not surprise. Not relief. Fear. You shouldn't be here, he whispered, his voice hoarse and barely there. I need answers, I whispered back. I need to know what's happening. He swallowed hard, rubbing his tired face, and motioned for me to sit. I lowered myself onto the chair across from him, the wedding album still pressed against my chest. He stared at it like it was poison. You brought it back? He asked softly. I need to understand, I said. He leaned back, closed his eyes, and took a slow, shaky breath. I hoped you'd throw it away, he murmured. Or bury it. Or burn it. Anything except bring it back here. A chill ran through me. Why? He slowly opened his eyes and looked at me with a heaviness that made my skin crawl. Because whatever follows that photo isn't just a shadow, and it isn't just a mistake in the lighting. I tried to tell myself it was. I tried to convince myself that I was imagining it. But photos don't change after they're printed. And yours did. My breath caught. So you saw it too. He nodded. Every time I looked at it, the silhouette was different. Closer. Clearer. Like it was trying to step out of the memory. I clutched the album tighter, my fingers digging into the leather. But why our wedding? Why that day? He hesitated, and that hesitation made my stomach sink. There's something you don't know about your husband, isn't there? He said quietly. My entire body went cold. What are you talking about? He stood up, walked to the wall, and pulled down a box from a high shelf. Inside were negatives, old ones, dusty, neatly labeled. He searched through them, pulled one out, and held it to the light. This, he said, is a photo I took of your husband an hour before your wedding. I never showed it to you. He placed the negative on his lightboard and switched it on. I leaned forward, and my heart stopped. The silhouette. The same dark, human-like shape from our wedding picture. It was standing behind my husband on the morning of our wedding, clearer than it ever appeared in the album. My hand flew to my mouth. Tears filled my eyes. What is that? I whispered. He shook his head slowly. I don't know. But it was there before your vows. Before your first dance. Before you said, I do. And your husband, he noticed it. I saw him looking behind himself that whole morning. I thought it was nerves. But now, I think he knew. My chest constricted as though something inside me was collapsing. Memories rushed back. My husband waking up pale, distant, trembling, whispering in his sleep, disappearing into the garden, checking over his shoulder constantly. I thought it was stress, exhaustion, anything but this. Then the photographer looked at me with a sadness that made my heart ache. There's more, he said. He handed me another photo. This one wasn't from the wedding. It was taken weeks later at our home. A picture I didn't even know he took. My husband was sitting on the porch looking exhausted and hollow. And there behind him again was the dark silhouette, clearer than ever, almost touching his shoulder. He asked me to burn these, the photographer whispered. He said he didn't want you to see them. He said he didn't want that thing near you. My tears finally spilled. My fingers trembled as I held the photo. My husband had tried to protect me. He had carried something heavy, something terrifying, something that followed him. And I misunderstood everything. I thought he was distant. I thought he didn't care. But he was scared. He was fighting something invisible and losing. What happened to him? I choked out. Why did he leave me? The photographer hesitated. He told me the night before he disappeared that he felt it getting closer, that he didn't want it to come for you next. He said the only way to protect you was to walk away, so it couldn't follow him into your life anymore. My whole body shook. I pressed the photo to my heart and sobbed quietly. My husband hadn't abandoned me. He had sacrificed himself for me. He had walked into the darkness alone, believing it would save me. And maybe it did. But the moment I opened that wedding album again, found its way back. The photographer leaned forward. There's one last thing I need you to do, he whispered. I wiped my tears. What? He pointed at the album. You have to destroy it. Today. Right now. Burn it. And whatever is attached to those images will finally let go. My breath trembled. My fingers shook as I opened the album one last time. The silhouette in the background had changed again. It wasn't standing behind us anymore. It was standing right behind me. I didn't scream. I couldn't. I simply closed the album, held it tightly and whispered, I'm sorry, my love, for understanding too late. Sweetheart, the fire pit behind the studio still warms my hands some nights when the memories ache too deeply. We burned it together, me and the photographer, page by page, photo by photo, until nothing remained but ash carried by the wind. And the silhouette never came back. My husband's memory finally rests. And so do I. Because sometimes the most haunting part of love is discovering the truth long after it's too late to say goodbye.